Hello, my dear church, brothers and sisters. It is exciting times that we live in. It's an exciting time of the year, right? In a few weeks' time, it's Christmas, and that's always a wonderful family time. And here this week was Thanksgiving, and to be honest with you, I actually don't have a clue what Thanksgiving is about, and that's bad. I know I need to figure that out. I need to go read up on that. But I do understand that you guys eat some turkey and that you spend some quality family time together. And so I hope that you had a happy Thanksgiving. I think it's the end of Thanksgiving. I think it's one day. And so I hope that you had some quality time together as family members. And I hope that you got a big fat turkey to eat. I've only eaten turkey like a few times in my life. Maybe once, I think, on a flight from here to you guys. It doesn't taste bad. I've had lots of chicken, KFC, and other chicken, and I think I've eaten some duck, crocodile. Yeah, but turkey, not really that much. It must taste quite good if you make it in America. So I'm looking forward to that sort of culture and to those experiences in the States. You guys have white Christmases. It's just snow everywhere. I understand. Our Christmases are sunny and we're on the beach and we spend time in the sun and everybody's on holiday. And so and that must be strange for you to have Christmas in summer. Anyways, our hearts go out to Larry. We know that he hasn't been too well. We're praying for him. We love you guys so much. Cannot wait to be there. I hope that this morning you enjoyed if it was showed to you this morning, that you enjoyed the video that we made for you, and that it was good for you to hear what we've been busy with and what the immigration process is going on. So we're very excited because it's slowly but surely coming to an end. One of these days we'll be there. We'll see you face to face and just have some wonderful fellowship, spend some time in the Word. We are busy with a series, How to Make Disciples. We have spoken about Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, and he was the great evangelist. Philip was an evangelist who did a great job, and we could learn some really practical things from him. And then last week I started talking about Paul. Paul was also obviously a great evangelist. Paul was an evangelist before he knew he was one. God used him to bring people, or to bring the gospel message into all the world before Paul even believed that Jesus existed. So there is this great figure in Christendom, in the beginning of Christianity, that just participated, or that God used so powerfully in reaching the ends of the earth. So last week I started talking about him, and I suggested that there are three specific principles we see in the way that Paul evangelized, that he made disciples, that I think is important to talk about. The first one that I mentioned was that Paul pursued the people that he could influence the most. That's why he always went to the synagogues first. And the principle that we can pull from there, or the practical application that we can pull from there, is to look at our lives, look at the circle of influence that we have, the contacts that we have, the acquaintances that we have in our lives, and ask the question, who of these people are most likely to listen to me, to what I've got to say? And then you approach those people first with the gospel. That's sort of what I learned from Paul and the methodology used in reaching people. The second principle that I highlighted last week was this, that Paul adapted his message to his audience. So when he spoke about things that would resonate with his audience, with the people that he was busy talking to. So when he was facing his Jewish brethren in the synagogues, he would start with Moses and Abraham. He would go all the way back and tell the story, because he's got that in common with his audience, and then he would lead them to Christ from there. We also see when Paul spoke to the Areopagus, he was dealing with a bunch of Greek philosophers. So what did he do there in Athens? Well, he spoke about their own poets. He brought up their own religious idols. And so he built a common ground with them. He adapted his message to his audience. And so the practical application with that is that it's not always the best idea just to randomly walk up to a person and say, do you know Jesus? Let me tell you about the gospel, etc., etc. It's always a good idea to first find out, where's this person at? What are the struggles that this person has in his or her life? And to first invest and find out who this person is before you speak. We saw that with Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch as well. And that just makes evangelism more effective. People want to know, why do I have to come to Christ? Or why is Jesus an important person to come to? Show me. And before you can show a person, you need to know what's going on in their lives. So, yes, so Paul had this way of adapting the gospel or the initial conversation with people by looking at their lives first. And then for tonight, and this really for me is perhaps the crux of Paul's methodology of reaching people. And this is the idea of rapport. That's why I've entitled Paul's section in this sermon as Reaching Starts with Rapport. Reaching starts with rapport. And that brings me to point number 3. Paul believed in the idea of rapport. I don't think that there is anything more important than building rapport with people when we talk about evangelism. In actual fact, this is one of the principles that Paul directly pointed out regarding his own evangelism methodology. Now, although I mentioned this passage, which we're going to read now, scripture in the previous section, I believe it deserves to be raised again. So I'm just going to read it again because it's very important. This is what Paul said. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 19 to 22. Though I am free and I belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. Let that sink in. I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things unto all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. It's phenomenal. Paul said, I will change myself to adapt to people. Not only do I adapt my message to people, but I even adapt my very being to people so that I could share Christ with them. Now, this word rapport, which I mentioned, is not mentioned in this text. But if you look carefully at the content or the principle that Paul is pointing out here, it becomes quite easy to identify Paul's methodology as rapport. We have to build rapport with people if we want to effectively reach them. Building rapport is synonymous with what I call connecting with people. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this guy by the name of Tony Robbins. He goes around the country. I don't know if he still does it, but he goes around and he's got a way with people, and he presents psychological ideas and how to interact with people. And he goes around the country and he holds these seminars, and he's presented numerous classes on this topic, the magic of rapport. So let's picture what Tony Robbins says and his idea of rapport in a secular idea. Let's look at that and let's compare that to what Paul says in this text. Although these teachings are designed primarily for interpersonal relationships, especially relevant to salespeople in the business world, it is very similar to the principles that we need to effectively connect with people when we talk about the gospel. Because in a sense, we are salespeople. We are selling the gospel to people. We want to show them why they need this product, the gospel. So these talks that Tony Robbins gives, they are sometimes advertised with the following heading: how to influence people and get what you want. How to influence people and get what you want. Now, I don't like that heading, and I'm not speaking about this so that we can get from people what we want, but I would merely like to point out how secular ideas are actually biblical ideas of evangelism. The task of evangelism will become increasingly effective the more our rapport increases with people. Now, to expand on the idea of rapport, let me summarize what Tony Robbins teaches about it. Okay, just listen to this. It's quite cool. In actual fact, I wanted to play you the video, but I thought it's going to go on too long. He says that people will not give you what you want until you give them what they want. Well, in the secular world, it's more or less the same. People will more easily accept what you ask of them if they see benefit in it, if they see that they can get something out of it. And you will not know what people want until you build a relationship of rapport with them. And that is exactly the same when we talk about evangelism. And I've mentioned this before. Let me just mention it one more time. You will not know where a person's life is broken and where the piece of the puzzle is so clearly missing, the piece of the puzzle being Jesus, unless you talk to them and find out why they need Jesus. Now, this is true in the business world, but it's exceptionally true in the missional world. What you want is you want a person to come to Christ. What that person wants might be a heart that is at peace, or a happy marriage, or an end to loneliness. Maybe that person needs companionship. But what the person wants, you won't accurately know about or understand until you have built rapport with that person, and that person has revealed it. And so maybe I should have done this before or already. Let me just define what rapport is. Now, this guy, Tony Robbins, he defines it as total responsiveness between people. Total responsiveness between two people. Rapport has taken place when someone totally responds to you and you totally respond to that person. And this is what everybody wants, isn't it? That when you have a conversation with somebody, you want that person to respond to you. And that person wants you to respond to them. But most people tend to only build rapport with people who tend to be like themselves. I'm just going to repeat that. And that's why I decided to include this in this lesson for tonight. Most people only build rapport with people who tend to be like themselves. The building of rapport starts with this tool of asking questions. So the asking questions tool is designed to extract information from people. So if we go back to Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, he asked questions, and I challenged you guys to ask people questions. Why are you asking questions? Because you're looking for information from them. What information are you looking for? You're looking for information that is common to you, right? And that is how rapport is created. Through commonality. Rapport is created by a feeling of commonality. I always do that. I always try to find something in that person I'm busy talking to that I can relate to. That is common ground for me in that person. Because when we find something in common, if it's the place of birth, or it's a language that we know, or if our mothers do the same work, whatever it is, that point of commonality can be the starting point of building rapport, okay? When we feel that we've got something in common with people, what happens immediately? There's a spark, isn't it? Just go think about it. You meet someone, and then you realize, and then you find out, oh my goodness, this person, this person is, I've got something great in common with this person. What happens immediately? There's a spark. Alfreda today, I'll give you an example. Alfreda today was in the gym. She was in a class, and exercise class, and she was wearing an American shirt, a shirt with the American flag on. And there was a lady also in the class that walked up to her and said to her, are you from America? And then they started having a conversation. No, but she's immigrating to America and she's going to Oregon. And then the lady said, well, I come from America. I come from California. And what happens immediately? Now they've got something in common. And what's the thing in common? America. And suddenly there's a spark. Suddenly the conversation starts to get more interesting. Now they start to get totally responsive towards each other. The conversation goes deeper. Oh, and are you guys in what do you guys do? Well, we're in ministry. And the other lady says, well, we're also in ministry. I was like, wow, well, that's cool. We both have America in common. We both are in ministry. Wow. And then the third question was, well, okay, so which church are you? You won't believe it, ladies and gentlemen. You won't believe it. Well, we're from the Church of Christ. And the lady's like, we're also from the Church of Christ. Wow, now it's already 3 points. Now you can imagine the sparks are going, the conversation is going. Now it's interesting. Now there's total responsiveness. And then fourthly, so what does your husband do? Well, my husband is a minister. Well, my husband is also a minister and an evangelist. Now there's even more commonality. The plot thickens, ladies and gentlemen. So what can you tell me? I don't know how the conversation went, but the conversation went to this. Well, my husband wrote a book recently. And the other lady's like, well, my husband also wrote a book recently. And the interesting thing is, I've got his book and he's got my book. Now there's already 6 things in common and we've never met each other. Isn't that interesting? So this is an evangelism conversation, but it just shows once again how commonality breeds rapport. What happened? They exchanged numbers. Now they want to take it further. You see, if you can build some solid rapport with people, you can exchange numbers. When numbers exchange, it could lead to a Bible study or a friendship, which could lead to that person getting to know Christ. So rapport is created through a feeling of commonality. When we feel we have got something in common with people, there's a spark that arises. The truth is that people like people who are like themselves, like I said earlier, and people don't like people who are not like themselves. We need to think about this. Okay? And we could also say that people who are like themselves, we could also say that we like people who are like ourselves or like whom we want to be. So you might see a person that's not like you, but you want to be like them, so you can build with rapport with them easier. All right. People don't like people who are not like them or who are not like who they want to be. There's a great psychologist by the name of Erik Erikson who lived, and he in his counseling, he just had a way of reaching people and connecting with them. He would mimic their attitudes and their demeanors and their style and their tone of voice when people came to seek help. And that gave him great success because people felt that they could connect with him. Although he was different, he just copied them. He became like them. He became like the people he was communicating with. Whatever they put out, he sent back the same message. That gave him tremendous success in his counseling endeavors. Why? Because he was building common ground by becoming like that person. Okay? When I listened to some of these talks by Tony Robbins, I immediately thought about Paul, who wrote Corinthians 2,000 years ago. Already back then, Paul knew that building rapport with people was the best way of reaching out to them with the gospel. In a nutshell, we see in Erik Erikson and Tony Robbins, that when you become like someone else, you build rapport with them. And when you build rapport with them, you are most likely able to influence them. Of course, Robbins and Erikson focus much more on psychological mirroring and sociological mannerisms. But Paul takes that to the next level. If we adapt our tone of voice, the content of our speech, our facial expressions, our hand gestures, and various other bodily movements to mimic the people we communicate with, we will more effectively reach rapport with them. It's practical 101 communication tips. But Paul goes deeper and farther. He goes deeper and to the Jews he became like a Jew, to the Greeks he became like a Greek, to the weak he became weak. Paul was willing to adapt his whole culture, his language, his religiosity, and his ethos in the most intense way necessary to find common ground with people, and so to build rapport with them and to teach them about Jesus. Because if he could become like them, they would like him, and he would be able to have influence in conversing with them. That's generally how people are. They build rapport with people that they like or want to be like. Sometimes Paul adapted himself or his companions so well in this cause that we would think it is possibly a stretch too far. Let me give you an example. In the book of Acts chapter 16, we read about Paul meeting a young man by the name of Timothy in Lystra. Paul is so impressed with this faithful young man that he decides to take him with him on his mission. But there is a slight glitch. Timothy's father is a Greek, and that means that Timothy was also considered a Greek. In other words, he was a Gentile. He wasn't circumcised. Now, that would pose a serious problem to Paul's ministry. As already noted, the first place that Paul would go was what? The synagogues. Paul's ministry always started with the Jewish populace, and they would not listen to Paul at all if he had with him a Gentile Greek that wasn't circumcised. I don't think they would even allow him into the synagogue. So what did Paul do? Well, he did what every man dreams about to happen to him, right? He had Timothy circumcised, according to Acts 16 and verse 3. Paul made Timothy become like a Jew in order to win the Jews. And goodness, didn't Timothy pay a price for that? Sometimes reaching people will take us totally out of our comfort zones. Sometimes it will cost us. But this extreme gesture of Paul built rapport with all the Jews that Paul and Timothy crossed paths with from here henceforth. Of course, Paul knew that circumcision is nothing. He said so in his letters. But in order to not alienate himself or his companions from the mission field, he had insisted on this surgery, and it reaped a great harvest as we read the rest of the book of Acts. Another example is found in Acts 21. You can read from verse 21 to 24 and also verse 26. Paul had just arrived in Jerusalem and given feedback on his ministry to the elders. And so the elders in Jerusalem were delighted about Paul's great report about how the mission work is going on around the world, and they were happy that he had come. But they were, however, a little bit fearful of how the Jews would treat him. You see, there were rumors going around in the Jewish society surrounding Jerusalem that Paul was moving about preaching that the Jews, they should turn away from Moses, they shouldn't circumcise their children, and neither should they follow the ancient customs of the Jews. And this was, of course, not the total truth. There was some truth to it. I mean, Paul did say the Jewish faith and its laws, that it's irrelevant in our salvation now that Christ has come. We are saved through faith in Christ. We're not saved through obedience to the law. That's what we studied in the book of Galatians. All right? But however, these Jews did not understand that yet, and Paul had an important ministry to continue on in Jerusalem. So to keep the door open between Paul's mission and the Jews of Jerusalem, the elders were quite clever. Okay, and they suggested that Paul must follow the typical customs of fulfilling a Nazirite vow. That would mean, and I don't want to go into all the details now, but it would mean that Paul would be spending a lot of money to purchase animals for sacrifice for 4 other men who were going through the same process as well. It would also force Paul to participate in a serious fast. It would also cost him the shaving off of his hair. The idea behind this was that Paul would not look like someone who disregards the law of Moses, but like someone who respects the law of Moses. Do you get what happened here? I mean, Paul is saying, okay, if this is going to build rapport with the Jews, then I'm going to make sure that I fulfill the Nazirite vow. And the evidence will be with my head that is shaved and the sacrifices that I make. And the Jews will then see these allegations that they hear about me is not the truth. Unfortunately, if you go read the text, it didn't work. Before the vow period of 7 days were over, Paul was already arrested by the Jews. The intention, however, was clear. Paul was trying to become like the Jews in order to win the Jews. Now, in my personal ministry, I've done many things in order to build rapport with people. I can't even remember all the things. Apart from obvious conversational cues, I've also done some things and become someone in order to form common ground with people. Now, I'm not suggesting at all that we become fake with people. That's not what this is about. It's not becoming someone that you are not. But if you are dead, can't you become anything then? And isn't that what happens when we're crucified on the cross before the burial into baptism? Our lives end. It's not about us anymore. So why can't I become whatever people need me to be so that I could resonate with them? Paul is teaching us to adapt to people, to whatever measure is necessary in order to connect with them. There are certain sports that I don't like, but I took it on in order to forge a relationship with people who did love that sport. From rifle shooting to fishing to playing tennis, I've done it all. Not because I like it, but because I love the person who likes it. And I'm willing to go a whole day and fish and not catch anything if I could connect with this person and build rapport. We've got something to talk about that fishing day when I burnt all the skin off my body in the sun. I've tried to learn new words in other languages in order to become better connected with people. I've got a Malawian guy staying across the valley here, and I try to speak to him in his Malawian language. It's annoying. I'd like to speak to him in my home language, but I can't do that. I've changed my diet in order to eat with people the food that they feel comfortable with, in order to connect with them. I don't like pubs, but I've gone there to meet with people because that is their world. I've worked on car engines with people because that is what they love. And me doing it with them built rapport, although I despised every moment of it because I had grease-infested nails. And these are minor and simple examples, but they are real life. When you become a disciple, you don't live for yourself anymore. Your wants, your likes, your desires, they take a back seat. You do what is necessary and you become what is necessary in order to reach people where they feel most comfortable. In this way, you build rapport like Paul did. And in this way, you end up making disciples effectively, just like Paul did. So let me summarize some of the key features in conclusion of Paul's evangelistic endeavors. He relied on the guidance of the Spirit. When traveling throughout Asia, he did not preach the gospel at all because the Spirit didn't allow him. When he tried to enter Bithynia to preach the gospel, the Spirit would not allow him. But during the same period, he was led by God into Macedonia. You can read that, Acts 16 verse 6 to 10. What do we see here? Sometimes there will be nobody to talk to about Jesus, and that's okay. But we must remain vigilant because at one point or another, God will open a door to fruitful ministry. When God opens the door, go. When He closes the door, accept it. We can only effectively make disciples through the people whom God wants to lead us to. Paul also handled opposition very well. When he faced opposition in one place, he went to another. He did not let himself be discouraged by opposition. As noted previously, Paul seems to always prioritize his reaching out to people who would most likely listen to him. Not only do we see this when he entered the synagogues, but we also saw it when he decided to go down to the river in Philippi, to the place of prayer. Paul knew that people of prayer would be a good audience for him to talk to about Jesus, and there indeed he did meet a woman by the name of Lydia, whose whole family came to conversion. That's in Acts 16 verse 13 to 15. Paul was a great debater. He was intellectual. Someone who could readily become all things to all in order to win some for Christ. But Paul also reached people even when he didn't plan it. A case in point would be the night that Paul and Silas was in prison in Philippi. They were both in chains, but started to sing songs of praise in the middle of the night. The other prisoners were listening. A great earthquake shook open the prison and the chains fell off. Long story short, but the jailer and his whole family obeyed the gospel that night. Acts 16 verse 16 to 40. We see here how Paul was just light wherever he went. Who knew a song in the middle of the night could bring the powers of God to earth and lead to the conversion of the most unlikely people? We need to be careful to cut people short. You never know if your enemy, the one that put you in chains, might just be the person you lead to Christ one day. I am so excited. Next week, we're going to talk about Jesus and how He made disciples. Have a fantastic week. Love all of you. Bye.